new urban slums. Here on Queensland's Gold Coast, not far from the beaches of Surfers Paradise, is the Mudgeeraba Holiday Village. A small team gets 30 to 40 calls a weekend. It might be from the police reporting an assault, a doctor who's seen some unusual bruising, or a neighbour reporting a violent argument in a house where there's children. Whether there's a history of abuse, any mental illness, drugs or alcohol, and evidence of violence. The more risks, the more likely they'll have to remove the children. What's happening lately is that there are families with many of these problems at once, and some families have the lot.
There are families presenting with more complex problems or issues like homelessness, accommodation, drugs, alcohol, domestic violence. Certainly at the after-hours service, when I read sort of all the notifications, I'm seeing a lot of domestic violence and drug use, polydrug use, and alcohol compounded with alcohol abuse, a very sort of common combination. And the sort of drugs we're seeing, are things like speed and ice, chronic marijuana use, heroin. It's using speed and being a parent is not really, compatible. But we need to understand, well, what actually does it mean in terms of what is likely to happen for these children if, in fact, mum and dad are using,
Drug use is one of the biggest reasons why cases of neglect are soaring. Illicit drugs and mental illness feed off each other like living things. You'll often hear welfare officers say they're the same creature.
And we talk a lot about going upstream, not just pulling bodies out at the end of the river when people have drowned or are near drowning, but actually going upstream, ensuring that people don't want to jump in the river in the first place or don't get into problems.
We had been in there supporting them for a period of time and then withdrew when the level of violence became too high and there was too great a risk to staff. But we've recently gone back in and we choose to go in on a morning group so that there's less alcohol consumption and less drug use in the morning. The caravans are trashed on a regular basis. I don't think there's one family in there that I've spoken to that hasn't said that they've got a desire to move out of there, that they feel unsafe there. They can't store food because the rats eat the food. The stench there from the animals is just horrendous. It's certainly not a pretty sight at all. And, the children have developmental delays and we have some twins living in a caravan that never come out of the caravan. It's really appalling. It's known to state authorities, but somehow it continues to exist.
What incident was it that made you pull out of there for a short time?
A worker was attacked by a dog. And in this particular park, the ambulance won't go in without the police assisting. So I think that says to you just the extent of the violence there, and the lack of safety.
The caravan park she's referring to is the Mudgeeraba Holiday Village on the Gold Coast, where we earlier spoke to Annie, a mother of two. The alarm bells are going off now. People drink more, eat badly, explode into violence or retreat into drugs, and neglect, hit or yell at children.
We've got a large proportion that are welfare dependent as adults that have been in and out of prison as adults that have serious mental health issues resulting often from the trauma that they experienced in their childhood. We have a high percentage who have addictions.
New studies are now giving us a better understanding of what causes abuse.
And we see the tip of the iceberg in terms of, some Indigenous people smoking more or drinking more or self-harming in a whole variety of ways. But you cannot understand that without going below the surface and looking at the way that control over culture, life and land has been systematically removed.
About a fifth of primary parents have had a criminal history, and also around the same amount, 1/5 or 20% of the primary parent has had a mental illness. So these are the key risk factors that we see time and time again associated with child abuse in Queensland.
Governments are desperate to predict which families might abuse their children so they can intervene early. And intervention, especially in Queensland, usually means taking children away and putting them with relatives or in foster care.
We also know that in some of these families, and nearly half of them, multiple risk factors are present. So it's not just a mental health issue, it's mental health, it's drug and alcohol abuse, and it's domestic violence. And with our successive research in this area, we do tend to find that where there are multiple risk factors, the likelihood of the children being reunified safely with their parents also decreases. So that will allow us to do probably some longer term planning in ensuring that these children are given a safe and loving homes, potentially.
Background Briefing's coordinating producer is Linda McGuinness. Research by Anna Whitfeld.